Welcome to this episode of the Arch Advocate Show. It's Tuesday, people. Thank you for joining. Thank you for hitting share. Thank you for hitting subscribe, brother or sister. You have no idea how much that means to me. When you hit that subscribe button, man, eventually that turns into money, right? Money you don't have to pay, but money I get. So please do hit subscribe. Tell all your friends. This is the #1 podcast in the world. It's not really. It's #1 in my book, though. Hey, listen, speaking of books, just got, my mom sent me some gifts for my son's birthday, and in that box was a gift for me. Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And I was reading the preface there, the foreword, by by Norman Doidge, by Norman Doidoi. And Norman posed an interesting question. This is why you got to read, people. You have to constantly read, and you have to constantly talk with other people, particularly ones who disagree with you. But one of the things that was a question and it's just in the foreword. It's not even into the book yet. He writes, he and Dr. Peterson became really good friends because they're both psychological people. And they were both kind of vexed by it. It's written, it says, the psychological mystery of self-deception. They were both kind of intrigued by this. The psychological mystery of self-deception. And then it says, how can a person deceive himself and get away with it? That's a really beautiful way of posing that question. The question, right? That's how you get to answers. As it is that Albert Einstein said, the answers don't elude us, the questions do, right? Whatever the answer is, it's already there. The truth is the truth, whether you're aware of it or not. It's not going anywhere. It's static. It's not dynamic, right? The questions are dynamic. Questions move. The answer is whatever it is. Therefore, you have to get good at the art of asking questions. I have to be good at the art of asking questions. That's how you get to the answers. And if you're not coming up with even more questions that are uncomfortable, you're saying, well, I've always thought it worked this way, but what if perhaps it works that way? Well, that's an uncomfortable thing because it's an affront to your preconceived notion. Nobody wants to believe that they were wrong or that are wrong, right? But the only way to get to what is right, what is correct, what is the truth, or what is the fact is through questions. And if your questions are not causing you, mental discomfort, then you're probably not asking the right questions. This is an uncomfortable question this man poses. And thank you, Dr. Doidoi. How can a person deceive himself and get away with it? Think about how that question is posed, right? This is something that I have struggled with for a long time because I've seen it my whole life. I've seen it in the church. I've seen it in, academia. I've seen it in anywhere where large groups of people come together on a consistent basis. You can see self-deception, right? I'll give you a case in point. Just yesterday, there's a guy, and by the way, I've never listened to this podcast. It's called the Wretched Podcast, and I see it on Facebook. This guy, he's a Christian guy. He's got a really nice studio, whatever. But I've never subscribed to the podcast. And I barely listen to it because there's not a lot of, as a Christian man, there's not a lot of Christians that I like to listen to, right? Because there's a lot of garbage that goes on inside of the corporation that is Christianity. There's a lot of nonsense that happens, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I've seen it my whole life, and I've always, simultaneously been offended by it and marveled at it. Like, how can you take you know, I've used this example before, and I use it because it's so offensive, but I also use it because it's easy. It's right there on the top. I can just pull it up and everybody understands what I'm saying. When people predict, like, oh, I figured out when Jesus is going to come back, it's like, dude, it says in the book that nobody is going to be able to figure it out. And Jesus Christ himself, right? The guy, right? The guy that the whole thing is over, Jesus, he said, I don't know. And nobody knows except the Father, right? Now that's something I read as a little boy. I read that for myself, and as I was growing up and I was seeing respected men of God saying, oh, I figured out when Jesus is coming back. It's like, dude. It says in the book that no, you don't. Like, you have deceived yourself. How is this possible? Are you reading a different book than me? Okay, well, if that's the case, then okay. Right? But I'm pretty sure that we're all reading the same book here. Like, it's always been, you know, something to marvel at. Like, wow, you're really out there with your self-deception. You know what I mean? And how do you deceive yourself? It's like, I was talking with my wife this morning about this same thing. Like, how do you know, let's change that word deceive and let's say steal. Can you steal from yourself? Right? Now, if listener Todd Milligan, you know, invites me over to his house, and I go into the garage and I steal, I don't know, like a power drill, right? Well, then I stole it. And then, you know, old Todd, poor Todd, who's been horribly stolen from, you know, a week or so later goes out to his garage. He's like, where the hell did I put my drill? Anybody see my drill? He's not going to know that it was me, right? I got away with it. I stole from poor listener Todd. Sorry, Todd. You know, I stole from listener Todd. I took his power drill, and I got away with it. He doesn't know that it was me. That's getting away with it, right? Now Todd knows that he's been stolen from. He is missing his power drill. He just doesn't know who it is, and he never will, right? He's never going to suspect me. I'm his friend. So he thinks, right? I'm actually plotting to come back to the United States and steal poor Todd's tools. But you see what I'm saying? Like, if you get stolen from, if you never figure out who did it, then that person got away with it, right? So how do you steal from yourself? It's like an impossibility. You can lose things, right? I think we've all played that game where we took a little cash from our wallet, at $20, $100 or whatever, and we stashed it somewhere. Like, I'm just gonna hide this money so that I'm less inclined to spend it, and that way at the end of the month I'll actually have some money left over. And then we forget where we put it, and then it's lost. Or somebody else finds it and doesn't know what the game is, so they just take it and they spend it. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different things. But so that's a bad example. Right? You can't steal from yourself. Or can you? Right? So deceiving yourself and getting away with it is the same thing as stealing from yourself and getting away with it. And I say that they're both possible. It happens all the time. How many times have you poured over your finances and tried to figure out, like, why am I broke? I paid the rent, I paid the electricity, and like, you're doing all the math and you've run out of money, but you can't track where you spent all the money. Well, you've stolen from yourself. That's how. You spent money on, you went to the gas station to get gas. That was a natural expense. But while you were at the counter, you bought, $10 worth of scratch-it tickets. And you lost all your money on that, and then you forgot that you spent that money on scratch-it ticket. You stole from yourself, and you got away with it. Because at the end of the month, you have no idea who spent that money. Who was that person who took that money? It was you all along. You took that money, and you got away with it. Right? You don't know that you stole from you. You see what I'm saying? That's kind of an interesting thought, isn't it? Like, that it is possible to steal from yourself and get away with it. and get away with it. That's the thing, is the not knowing how it happened, who did it, who done it. Gonk honk. Right? Law and Order. Bing, 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 bing. Right? Benson and Hedges come in. Sorry. Benson and Stabler come in. Now what's the deal here, boss? Right? Who did it? That's the big mystery. Who did it? Well, it was you the whole time. How can you deceive yourself and get away with it? It happens all the time. We can see it in our society right now. We can see it in our society right now. We have people that are running around calling other people a Nazi and physically assaulting them and attempting to murder them. Attempted murder. Attempted murder. That's what Eric Canton did when he hit that guy on the head with the bike lock. He tried to murder him. And why? Well, because he, in Eric Canton's sick mind, that he had deemed that person, he had deceived himself to such a degree that that other person was a literal Nazi. Somebody who was trying to take over the world, starting with Europe, and exterminate all the Jews, all the blacks, and all the Christians, and everybody who wasn't on board with, the Third Reich. In Eric Canton's mind, that's who that person that he hit on the head with a bike lock was, a Nazi. Eric Canton deceived himself, and he's currently getting away with it. In his mind. Legally it's a different issue, but in his mind, he's, if you were to sit down and talk with him right now, I guarantee you, because I've studied this phenomenon quite a bit, I guarantee you, if you sat down with Eric Canton right now, he would tell you, like, oh yeah, man, listen, what I'm doing, this is God's work, man. This is a holy thing that I'm doing. You don't understand, man. There's Nazis about. We have to kill those Nazis. Right? You don't understand, man. Like, these people, they're trying to exterminate all the Mexicans. Or whatever, racial. They're trying to exterminate all the blacks. You know what I mean? Like, in his mind, that's what's going on. He has deceived himself, and he's gotten away with it. Now, the reason this is such an interesting question is not so that we can look at Eric Canton and be judgmental of him. That's easy. That's too easy. Any rational... oh, by the way, Eric Canton is a college professor, by the way, right? So, boy, rationality has taken a bizarre turn. But what I was going to say is it's too easy to use that example because it's so, it was on TV, or on YouTube shows or whatever. It was sort of, well, those are just other people. They don't really exist because they only exist on my screen, on my television screen or on my computer screen or whatever. There's no actual connection to it. So how do we ask this question and come into contact with it, right? To have a visceral reaction to that question. How do you deceive yourself and get away with it? This is the thing that has haunted me for a long time, right? Is because when I realized, like, well, wait a minute, maybe the reason why there's so much nonsense going on in the church is because people are quick to deceive themselves. And if that's true, how is it that I myself am deceiving myself? How am I deceiving me? Are there things that I believe, are there things that I'm doing that are a representation of self-deception? I do it because I've convinced myself of this thing. I've deceived myself, and therefore I am getting away with it. I've tricked myself. We have to ask those questions of ourselves. Is there somewhere where I am doing this? This is the whole idea of Dr. Peterson, forgive me if this is incorrect, but this is what sparked the entire work of one Dr. Jordan B. Peterson is the Nazis. Is thinking like, that idea of like, well, how did these people come to this conclusion? What was it in them that allowed this horrific thing to happen? And once I identify that, I need to then make sure that I do not ever do the same thing. I don't need to go find the Nazis. I just need to make sure that I am not a Nazi. That's what started his whole work. Was like, let's just figure out how things went so horribly wrong in Germany in the 1930s. How did everybody fall for this horrible thing? Almost everybody, right? And that is the ultimate conclusion. Is, well, they allowed themselves to be deceived. They deceived themselves, and they got away with it. They continued living in that delusion until it was far too late. They eventually woke up at the end, right? They eventually got found out, but far too late, right? So what do we do? What do we do to make sure that we're not deceiving ourselves and are currently getting away with it? You know what I mean? Like, it's that concept of not being aware of what you don't know, right? There are questions that are so far down the line to be asked that we don't even have a concept of what those questions are going to be. There's things that we know, and there's things that we know that we do not know, right? Like, how many stars are in our own galaxy? We don't know. How many galaxies are there? We don't know. But we know that we don't know that, right? And then there's a third thing. There's what we don't know that we don't know. We are not aware of the fact that we don't know it. That's where the idea of, deceiving yourself and getting away with it, that's the most important part of that question, I believe, is getting away with it. Right? It's one thing to deceive yourself, it's another thing to get away with it. Because then you're a ridiculous person. Right? You tricked yourself and you got away with it. It's as ridiculous as the idea of stealing from yourself and getting away with it. It sounds funny, doesn't it? It sounds funny, like, you can't steal from yourself, number one. And number two, you can't do anything that you're not aware of, right? Jesus talked about this concept, when he was talking about giving in church, right? There's a lot of scripture about the importance of giving, right? And that there is some sort of metaphysical revelation that is promised to you if you practice regular giving, right? But in Judaism, just like everything else, they turned everything into a ceremony. That the most important thing about it was the ceremony itself and not the act. And so what was going on in those times 2,000 years ago is when people would show up to synagogue, or otherwise known as church, right? People would show up and they would blow a horn. It's called a shofar. It's a horn that's made out of a ram's antler, whatever. Is it antler or horn? Whatever. So they would blow this trumpet, burp, burp, I'm here. And then everybody would turn and look, like, oh, somebody's blowing a horn. Let's check out who that is. Everybody would turn and look, and that's when the person would pull out their purse and throw some dough into the, coffers there. By the way, if you want to throw some dough my way, it's archadvocate.com, arch-advocate.com. You can throw some dough on PayPal, or you can become a monthly Patreon supporter, but I digress. That's how it went down, so that what was going on is these people were like, look at me giving. Look at me. I'm a holy person. I'm giving money. Whee! And that was the sociological norm. Everybody signed on to that, like, okay, I guess this is what giving is. It means when I show up to church for just a brief moment, I can be famous in front of all of my friends. Famous for being a holy, good person that honors God with their money, right? And Jesus said, no. Listen, when you do that, you do have a reward, right? There, you are being momentarily famous in front of your community, but that is the reward itself. It is a reward, but that's all it is. That's all you're getting out of this. But if you do it in private, you will then experience the super spooky, like metaphysical things that happen when you practice giving in secret. And he said, this has baffled people for 1700 years. He said, when you give, do it in private, and don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. What do you mean, Jesus? What are you talking about? Left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. First of all, Lord Jesus, my hands don't have a brain of their own. There's only one brain, and it's right behind these two eyeballs that can see everything. And if my right hand gives money, it's not like my left hand has eyeballs. What are you talking about, Jesus? What are you talking about, Jesus? Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. That's silly talk. Well, think about it. Right? What he's talking about is stealing from yourself. Right? That concept of stealing from yourself. It can't be done, can it? Well, yes, it can. Like I said, you go to the gas station, right? You have budgeted into your account. You have your electric bill and your mortgage or rent or whatever, your car note, your insurance, your life insurance. Burnt cold, everybody. Right? You have all of your expenses budgeted out. You know how much money you need for gas. Right? You know how much money you need for everything. And you go to the gas station, to pay your pound of flesh, right? Pay your $100, or whatever you guys are paying for a tank of gas. But you fill up your tank. That money is allotted, and then you take out your right hand and you pay the person at the cashier, right? But then you also, while you're in the AM/PM or the Circle K or 7-Eleven or Quick, what's the one in the Midwest? Quick Mart, Quickie Time, whatever. That's the best one I've been all around the United States. It's the I know they have it in Missouri and Kansas, but Quick Trip, QT, Quick Trip. That's the best in America by far. By far. Anyways, you go into Quick Trip and they've got a full-on deli. They've got 10 different kinds of coffee. You know what I mean? Like, they have everything, dude. They have every stinking thing in there. They got scratcher tickets. They got your Copenhagen and Camels. They got everything. And so instead of going in to drop off your $50 for the gas that you just pumped, well, now you get yourself, a 40-ounce soda, candy bar, bag of chips, 2 scratchers, a can of snuff. You stole from yourself. Your right hand did something that your left hand was not a party to. You stole from yourself. Right? There's a good side of that, and that's what Jesus was talking about. He's like, when you give, do it like that. Do it so like you're not even really thinking. You're just giving automatically, right? You're just giving out of a place of like, okay, well, I see a need right in front of me. I'm going to fill this need right now. Right? And if you don't have, discipline in your finances, if you don't have a written down budget and all that other stuff, then you're not going to be free to do that. Right? Because you're always going to be broke. Why? Because you're stealing from yourself and you're getting away with it. That's, to me, like when I read that question, how do you deceive yourself and get away with it? It's a horrifying question because it's like, well, how much is it that I'm doing in my life where I'm deceiving myself and I'm getting away with it? Right? Now, all that being said, it's like we're looking around at a time right now, because this has been the aching question of my life for the last few years, has been like, when did everybody go crazy? When did everybody start losing their minds? Was it always this way, and it's just social media and television is just bringing it to my attention? Was it always like that? Were there always so many crazy people? People who just don't ask any questions whatsoever? Like, there's things that happen in front of everybody, and everybody can see it, and just nobody has any questions. Like, there's just, last week, The week before, there was a terrorist camp busted in New Mexico. A 3-year-old little boy's dead body was found, and that boy was related to the people who were arrested. They were training kids to kill in the name of their God at public schools or at a school. And then those people that got busted, they were released on $20,000 bail. You say, oh, $20,000, that's a lot of money. Well, it would be, except for the fact that I believe, and at least this is how it works in California, to get bail, you only have to post 10% of your bail to the bail bondsman. So $20,000 becomes $2,000. That's not a lot of money. And nobody has you don't have any questions about this. These liberals, these leftists, it's like you hate conservatives so much, and you believe your notion of progress, of progressivism, your notion of progress means you're just going to let these people who were getting ready to murder a bunch of people, you're just going to let them go in the name of your ideology? You don't have any questions. You're deceiving yourself, and you're getting away with it. And it's going to work out very bad for all of us. This is why you have to talk to people. This is why we have to remain calm and continue in our efforts to try to bring these people back to the table of reason. Because when this whole thing plays itself out, it's going to be just like Germany's Great Awakening once the war was over. You can go back and watch videos. All those Germans, like, they were in complete denial that there were concentration camps and the Jews were being exterminated. They were just being told that they were put on a train and being shipped off to somewhere else outside of Germany, like, just get out. And when they were being told, like, no, they were being killed, but thousands a day were being killed in gas chambers. They were like, no, that's not true. That's not true. No German person would ever participate in that. That's brutal. That's brutality. There's no way a German person would participate in that. And you can watch videos when those people who were in denial were taken to those camps, and they were taken into those shower rooms where they could see the fingernail marks on the concrete walls of people who were trying to claw their way out as they were breathing their last breath. And you can see their faces as they are walking back up, because they have video of it. The shocking reality of the decisions that they had made, and the deception, the level of deception that they had allowed themselves and to not only become that deceived, but to get away with it. When the reality finally hit them, you can see their faces. They were horrified, right? And the rest of their lives, if you do end up watching those videos, like, the rest of those people's lives were ruined because they were complicit. You see, I just used the example of the terrorist training camp on U.S. soil. Let's go a little bit bigger. We've seen that in our realm of academia, that for decades, that those institutions have been preaching and indoctrinating the youth of the United States with the idea of socialism. No irony lost that these professors are making tons of money, and they're not going to be lowering what they expect to see in their paycheck anytime soon. I mean, the irony is just so thick in that. But let me continue on with this thought. How is this possible? So you're saying that you want to become a socialist government, and communism is going to fix everything, right? Why are you okay? So there's only think about it like this. So we know that everybody who's gone socialist and have completely turned the economy over into the hands of a few politicians that believe that they should be the parent of that society, every single time that that's happened, millions of people starved to death and were locked up in prisons where they were starved to death or put to death. It happened every single time, and hundreds of millions of people lost their lives in the most horrific way possible. Starvation is the most horrific death a person can face because it's long. Right? You torture somebody, eventually, very quickly, they're going to die from being in pain. Their brain will just shut off. Starvation's different. Your brain will not shut off from starvation. Your body will just continue eating itself. Right? It's really, it's the most horrific way that somebody can die possible. By a country mile. And this ideology, this, being socialist, which always turns into communism, but this idea has been so proven to, we have to stay away from this. We have to teach our children to avoid this idea the same way that we teach them to avoid crystal methamphetamines. Right? That's what we've come to. That's what we know about socialism. Because it always ends up in tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people dying the most cruel and horrible death. That's why we stay away from it. And yet, that's what has been taught as indoctrination to our nation's youth now for decades. Why? You go talk to these people, it's like, well, what? Do you not read history? Oh, well, yeah, well, that wasn't real socialism, they say. The Gulag Archipelago never happened. I used to have a friend. She's right up there in Croatia, right? She's probably just a few hours away from where I'm at. She has a PhD in communism. She loves it. She loves communism. You know what she told me? The Gulag Archipelago was a work of fiction. That's how that's self-deception and getting away with it. Right? So you're just going to take this man's experience where even though every literary scholar, there's not a single person out there whose life's work is like reading books and knowing the difference between fiction and nonfiction, like those people. There's nobody on the planet that's going to read that and study Solzhenitsyn and look at that and say, yeah, this is a work of fiction. There's nobody who would say that. But it's the only way for that particular self-deception to work. When I'm being confronted with the fact that this man was sent off to a gulag because of communism, which is the end result of socialism. Remember, the USSR, they were not communists. USSR stands for Union of the Soviet, which by the way means, the word Soviet means like tribe. Union of the Soviet Socialists Republic, USSR, not communists. They were not communists, right? They were socialists. You say, what's the difference? There is none. Anyways, the only way for that self-deception to work is if you take a fact and completely in your mind just discount it. Just get rid of it. Here's this fact right here that completely disturbs my bullshit. So rather than confront my bullshit, I'm going to get rid of the thing that's calling me out on it. That's deceiving yourself and getting away with it. These people that are running around in our nation, in the Western world, there's so many examples like these. Like, why are you importing young African men who have very low IQs have absolutely nothing to offer. They're not tradesmen, they're not scholars, they're not even workers. These nations, Germany, France, England, they are paying money, a great deal of money, to import these people into their country. And they're raping the hell out of everybody. Sweden is now the rape capital of the world. The rape capital of the world. Not the Western world, the whole thing. Sweden. Why are they importing people? And it's not even so much that, because it's like, well, that's politicians, right? There's evil politicians all throughout history. Like, that's an easy one, but it's not that. It's why is there so many of the citizenry standing in the gap for these rapists and murderers and people who splash acid in people's face? Why is this happening? It's mind-boggling, right? It's like, once you get outside of the fact that it is happening and the offensiveness of the fact that it is happening, you come to the question. It's like, okay, well, what's actually happening here? When you see people standing up for the rights, right, the human rights of these people who are murdering and raping and splashing acid, and that there was that guy that threw the acid in that little boy's face the other day. And then there's all these leftists who come running out like, oh, let's talk about what a horrible life this man has had. It's like, no, we don't. We don't need to talk about that. I'm sure he had a horrible life. You must have a horrible life if that is who you have become. Yes, if you have become the kind of person that throws acid in the faces of small children, I am supremely confident that you have had a shitty life. I don't feel bad for you, though. I feel bad for the little boy. You've had your chance. I had a shitty life too. I don't throw acid in people's faces. Everybody's had a rough life. Everybody's had their time where life just beat their ass. Life is hard. And if you have become the kind of person through that hardship, if you've become the kind of person who drives a car through a bunch of walking pedestrians, then you're a piece of shit and you need to be removed from my planet. Life is hard for everybody. Life is hard on everybody. And if your hardship has led you to the place where you throw acid in the faces of anybody, then you're a piece of shit. You need to be removed from my planet. Life is hard on everybody. Life is hard on everybody. It's hard on everybody. I can sit here and tell you my sob story. I've told a couple of gems over the course of my not even 1 year of podcasting. I've told stories like life has not been easy for me. Guess what? It's not been easy for anybody. Everybody knows, like if you're over the age of, I'd say 30, everybody knows like somebody who's lost a child or fought cancer and won, fought cancer and lost. You know what I mean? Like everybody knows that everybody's, had their struggles. Everybody knows that. And if you're, these kids that are running around these days that are talking about, oh, we want socialism. It's like, listen, you're going to get another 100 million people killed. You're going to get another 100 million people killed. That's why we're not going to listen to you. And furthermore, we need to figure out how it is that you became so deceived and that you deceived yourself. And we need to figure out how it is that you're getting away with it. Have you not studied any history? And if you have studied history, are you reading the history books from the people who were actually there? Or are you reading revisionist history? You know why that lady who has a PhD in communism, you know why she was able to say to me with a straight face that the Gulag Archipelago was a work of fiction? Because many years after that book was written, somebody else came along and wrote another book about that period of history, and their take on it was completely different. She read that one, and she completely, in her mind, she completely dismissed the fact that the person who wrote that history book was not a participant in that history. They were a revisionist, and that's why we don't read revisionist history without understanding the context. Right? It's like when you read these books about, or hear these stories, when people get up there and they're like, oh, Americans were so rough on the Native Americans. The Europeans, they brought over all this disease, and then there was a genocide and whatever. It's like, okay, you're not reading the history from the people who actually were there. Because if you read those books, you find out like, oh, these people were actually very violent. Many of those tribes were practicing cannibalism. The word Sioux, as in Sioux Nation, do you know that that's not actually their name? Their name is Crow. Sioux, that word Sioux in the tongue of the time, it meant enemy. The Sioux Nation is what everybody else called them. Those are the enemy, right? Because they were vicious and violent, and they practiced killing other tribes. People will give you this version of history, like when the Europeans showed up to America, that there was just a bunch of peaceful hippie, Indians, and the white people just pulled out their swords and just started slaughtering MRFers. That's not how it happened. If you read the history from the people who were actually participating in what was going on, it's a completely different tale altogether. Now, you could make the argument that, like, well, yeah, but, history is written by the victors. That's right. So I guess we're kind of screwed then, aren't we? All we have to go on is from the people who actually knew how to write and had pens made out of feathers. That's what we're left with. We have to take the word for it because they were the only ones there telling the story. Right? People you talk to these people that are into socialism, and they'll be like, oh yeah, white people suck. White people killed all the Indians. White people killed all the Aboriginals in Australia. Dude, go watch Stefan Molyneux talk about the history of Australia. It's like they want to give you some pie in the sky, like, oh yeah, they showed up to Australia, man. There's just these peace-loving hippies. It was basically like Burning Man. Man, there's just a bunch of peaceful people sitting around, and the white people showed up and just started slaughtering everybody. They'll tell you the same thing about Christianity in the Crusades. Oh man, religions killed more people than anything else. That's a Noam Chomsky idea. Religion is the number one causer of death. Well, I guess you could say that. But you get to the idea of the Crusades, right? When people start bringing up like, oh, look at the Christians in the Crusades. Oh yeah, what about the Christians in the Crusades? Tell me what books you've read about the Crusades. What happened? Oh well, man, the Muslims were just down there in Palestine minding their own business, and the Christians, man, they just got a wild hair up their ass and decided they're going to go down there and start slaughtering everybody. It's like, no, that's not what happened. That is not what happened. There is a whole story of why it was that that people from Western Europe made that journey all the way down to the Middle East. And it wasn't because they just wanted to slaughter people that they didn't like. There's a whole story there. And that's why self-deception is dangerous. Because it allows you to erase history. If it were not for Christianity, the Western Europe would have progressed into even more savagery. 1700 years ago, right, when Christianity really started gaining steam outside of southern Italy, right, outside of coastal Greece and coastal Turkey, like when it really started pushing into Europe, dude, Europe was a savage place, and it was full of barbarians. That's where that word comes from. It comes from when when the Roman Empire finally met up with like Germany and whatnot. They're like, man, these people are savage and their language is so stupid that when they speak, that sounds like bar, 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 bar. So we're just going to call them barbarians. And France, it wasn't called France back then. It was called Gaul. There were savages. White people back then, European people back then were savages. And then all of a sudden, they became the epicenter of education and enlightenment. How did this happen? How is it that everything good that the world experiences to this day has all come out of Europe and westward into America? Mostly America, but you understand the connection, right? Of Europeans came to America, but ultimately they were from Europe, of European descent. How is it that these savages, these barbarians, became the smartest people on the planet and fixed everything? How did this happen? It's Christianity. That's what it is. That's what it was. It was Christianity. The influence of Christianity on, you can see it if you bother to study the history. So these people that are walking around saying, oh, it's Christian people's fault, and it's white people's fault. It's the patriarchy, man. It's capitalism, man. It's like you're saying that everything that's good in the world is everything that's bad in the world. That is a level of self-deception that we cannot tolerate for people to get away with. And most importantly, we cannot allow ourselves to get away with it if we are living in self-deception. Those are my thoughts for the day. I strongly recommend that you pick up Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, foreword by Norman Doi. Pick that book up, read it. If you want to discuss stuff with me, send me an email. I would love to have an open discussion about this. But look, these are strange. Here's another thing. Yesterday in the news, there was that economist, Paul. He's that guy that in the 90s he said, yeah, the internet, man, this is going to go the way of the dodo. He said that the internet is going to be the same thing as fax machines. It's a fad. It's going to work for now, but then it's going to go. Like, he's just... there's some brilliant things. What's his last name? It starts with an H. He's done some good work, but man, he says a lot of really, really stupid things. So he's an economist. He's not a business owner, right? He's not a entrepreneur. Nor is he a politician. Nor is he a religious leader. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to make sure that, like, you understand. He is an economist. He belongs in a very specific, very niche, category of people. And he came out yesterday, the day before, and he said, we don't need to impeach Donald Trump. We need to have this presidency annulled. Right? And the left were just twisting their nipples and rubbing peanut butter on their genitalia and whatnot. They just had an orgasm over this idea. Ooh, let's just annul the presidency. Ooh. It's like, listen, leftists, all right, there is no mechanism in our way of life, in our law. There is no such thing. There is no procedure where a presidency would be annulled. You can impeach him. You can impeach him and have him removed from office. Which, by the way, those are two very different concepts. You have to keep that in mind. Like, first you have to impeach him, and then you may or may not be successful in that. But let's just say you are successful. Let's say you impeach him, and he is found guilty of something. Then there's a whole nother problem of having him removed from office. Do you convince him to resign, or do you all vote as the Senate and have him removed? It's a completely they're very different problems. But forget everything I just said. What he was saying was, no, we're going to have this annulled like it never happened. That way we get rid of Pence. We don't have to face, 2 more years of Pence being the president. It's like, dude, there is no mechanism legally for that. You are talking complete you're talking about the Bigfoot riding a unicorn who farts rainbows. It just doesn't exist. What you just said is fairy dust bullshit nonsense. And the left just lost their tits over that. Oh boy, that's a really good idea, Paul. You know what I mean? Like the level of self-deception. It's like you're allowing yourself to be deceived and you're getting away with it. Newsflash, people, there's no annulment. It doesn't exist. There's no mechanism for that. And the level of insanity, it's the insanity that is what gets me. Right? When did people lose their minds? Like, listen, I hated Barack Obama. I never said so while he was president. I hated that guy. But, you know, when I at the time, I was still sort of in my place in my mind where it's like, I just, you know, I can say if I like his policies or if I don't like his policies, but I'm not going to talk about like the man himself, right? Because that's, you know, he's the president. And I don't want to, I think it's damaging to the fabric of our society to, you know, badmouth the president on a personal level while he's still sitting in office. I've kind of changed my tune on that anymore, but you know, at the time it's like I didn't badmouth the president, but I hated him. Like I was like, no, this is a bad person. This is a bad guy. Right? And if you would have told me in the news, you know, during those 8 years, like, oh, we're, as Republicans, we are going to move to have this presidency annulled, I would have looked at you and slapped you and been like, dude, you're living in some weird fantasy world. Shut up. There's no such thing. There's no articles of annulment. There's no articles of annulment. There's no procedure in place to annul a presidency. It doesn't exist. What are you, you know what I mean? If you would have said that about a guy that I personally hated, I would have been like, dude, shut up. Shut up. Don't talk bullshit. Don't talk bullshit to me. And how it is that these people on the left, on the news, on CNN and MSNBC and all these other people that start jacking off every time a guy like this says something like that, how is it that those people don't look at Paul, whatever his last name is, and say, dude, shut up. Shut up. Don't talk bullshit. You're talking bullshit. Don't do that. The fact that the left is not doing that right now is a sign that it's like, dude, you people are insane. You've lost your objectivity. You're deceiving yourself, and you're getting away with it. And you look as ridiculous to me as a person who has stolen from themselves. It's nearly impossible, you know what I mean? You have to go way off into metaphor land before you can fully describe how someone might steal from themselves. Well, you've done that, only instead of steal, you've deceived. You've deceived yourself. You tricked yourself. It's like you mastered this magic trick, and then you performed it, and you yourself were then amazed by it. Like, whoa, there must be a trick to that. It's like, you moron. You've deceived yourself, and you're getting away with it. What's the point of this whole podcast today? Don't be that guy, I suppose. I suppose that would be the message of today. Don't be that guy. Don't deceive yourself and you know, maybe you're going to take a dump in the morning, or maybe it's going to be on your drive to work, or whatever little period of 5 minutes that you have where there's peace and quiet and you have time to yourself. Take those moments every once in a while and ask yourself that question, like, are there things that I'm deceiving myself on? Are there things that I believe that aren't true? Right? And like communicate that to the Almighty. Right? There is a God. And this God wants you to know the truth more than you want to know it. The truth is good for you, and this great God wants nothing but good for you. You have to believe that. And the truth is good for you. And if you ask this God, like, dear God, let me not be responsible of this one particular sin. Please, let me not deceive myself and get away with it. I'm asking you to show me if I am deceiving myself so that I can correct that. I don't want to be guilty of that thing. There's a really brilliant passage about this very concept in the book of Jeremiah, but I'm not going to look it up right now. That's the show for today. Don't deceive yourself, people, and don't allow yourself to get away with it. God bless you all. And again, if you want to support the show, we need dough, people. Do-re-mi. Cabbage, bread, wampums. Or wait a minute, wampum is tobacco. You know what I'm saying. The cabbage, the greenbacks, the sawbucks. If you want to support the show on a monthly basis, do it on Patreon at arch-advocate.com, archadvocate.com, or PayPal if you just want to throw down some dough. I appreciate you guys, and I will talk to yous tomorrow.